Opposed, the same. Approval of the minutes carries. Okay, we have citizens' communications, and the person who has signed in is our chaplain, Richard Harris.
Should I come up there?
Please. We're streaming, so we have to all be conscious of these mics.
I'm just going to ask that we have a moment of silence to remember Carla Garrett in her 27 years of devoted service in the dietary department here at the Nacogdoches. So let's just have a moment of silence now. Father, as I think of Carla and her family over the years, I remember their bold testimony of the love of Christ in their lives. And so now, Father, the family and we can boldly proclaim that she's experiencing the love of Christ fully. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Chaplain. We have a Wow Moment of the Month recognition, Stella Barrow.
Great when a rookie gets to give a wow moment. You are going to recognize the recipient tonight because every single one of you that are employed here, and perhaps even the board, are welcomed by this recipient as you come on board, and probably then annually as she meets and greets us for all vaccinations. So I'd like to ask Athena Johnson to come up for her wow moment recognition. This was submitted by the Cath Lab, and it says she goes above and beyond to take care of our NMH employees. She took time out of her day to come to the Cath Lab to give us our flu and TB tests. She made it quick, easy, and painless, even though there were some maybe nots on the pain list. We really appreciate everything she does to make our routine testing easy so that we don't have to take time out of our busy schedule. It's from Tanya and Lindsay and Michelle and Micah, Lori, Katie, Kay, and Lindsay. Congratulations. Something special in it already?
Okay, we have another special recognition, another wow moment of the month. And for all of you who attended our 90th celebration earlier this week, it was due to the work of quite a number of people. But the two kind of in charge were Vanessa, who is in charge of the food service, and she is not well. She has been working so hard that it has taken a toll on her, and Kim Barton. So Kim, if you will come up and bring the people with you, because we need to thank your interns, and we need to thank all of the food service people, and I'm sure there are committee people as well who are here that need to come up and take the acceptance of what a wow gathering that celebration was. It was awesome. Thank you so much for all your efforts. It was really, really appreciated by the board, the staff, and our community. We heard so many nice things about it. Thank you so much. Okay, Board Education, Susan Patterson.
As she said, I'm Susan Patterson, and I'm the nursery educator here at Memorial Hospital. And I've been tasked with providing some board education on an ongoing basis. And I know that when we had our joint commission surveyors here recently, some talk was, or there was some talk of them providing education. And I think it was going to be basically onboarding new board members. Unfortunately, that education has not been made ready for us yet. So what I thought I would do tonight is just introduce myself and maybe ask you board members what you thought would be the most beneficial thing for me to bring to you so I can make it worthwhile for you. Whether it's gonna be facility specific or regulatory, whatever you guys think would be the best thing. You can just let me know, not necessarily right now, but you can let me know and I'll make it ready and have that at the next board meeting, okay? All right, thank you.
Okay, next we will have Dr. Jeremy Smith with the medical staff reports.
Yes, thank you. Like we do every month, we review appointments, reappointments, and suggestions for medical staff to be active and bring them for your approval. We've done that this time as well. These have all been through peer review and, credential committee, pre-document AC. We have reappointments, withdrawals, and then one change of status present there. We brought those for your review. If you entertain any questions. We definitely.
Are there any questions from this report that you've been given?
I move we approve the medical staff reports.
Thank you, Lisa.
A second.
All those in favor say aye. Opposed, the same. Motion carries. The report's approved. Thank you. Rhonda, results of operation.
All right, thanks. There's a couple of housekeeping items that I'd like to go over before we start. Can you pop that up into a? Can you get it to do the there? Perfect, yes, I think it will. Yep, it will, perfect, thank you. All right, now we're ready. Here we go. There's a couple of housekeeping items I'd like to address to the board. If you look on your package, on your financials, and the very last page is the balance sheet. And I'd like to kind of go over what this other current assets is. Dr. Head brought this up in our finance committee. But we had a large balance at June of 18, and there were several items that are in that category. We had our DISRIP receivable of $1.8 million that was in there. We had our DISPRO in there that was $1.3 million, and that's also where our Medicare cost report settlement resides. So we don't accrue that on an ongoing interim basis, but at the end of the year, we make sure that that number is in there. So that's why you see such a big variance between the June 30 number and the current numbers. In October, that negative was just a reclass that didn't get booked between cash and cash equivalents and other current assets. So that's what that reclass did not get made, and that would make that even. So I hope that kind of clears up some of the questions that you may have had on the balance sheet. Dr. Head, does that hopefully addresses your concerns? A couple of other housekeeping items that kind of talk about my accounting department. They're not here. I wish they were here. They have done such a yeoman's job this year for us. We had our audit that was done 5 months previous to where it was performed last year. We just finished our cost report at 11:30, and we are getting a $500,000 receivable this year from Medicare that we should get in the next 90 days. And that department is operating with about 50% staff than what they had in June, and we took on payroll, so they're really doing a yeoman's job. So sometimes you might see some of these, accounting things that we have to catch the previous month, but whenever we move the report up, or the board meeting up a week, it makes us really scramble over there. In regards to my business office, they're working diligently to bring our commercial billing back in-house, so I think that'll be beneficial for the hospital and the organization, and we'll speak more to that over the next coming months. And the other kind of housekeeping item is we have been receiving our financial reports through CHC. Our system is very antiquated, so we send the reports to a fact file down to CHC, and they produce these reports for us. I did reach out to them, and they're gonna get me a proposal by the end of the week to continue to do this on an ongoing basis at a very, quote from them at a very nominal fee, because this is not very time intensive for them. So hopefully we can continue to use the same reporting package over the next several months to kind of bridge us to our next step. So those are just some housekeeping items that I wanted to go over with you. So now we'll kind of go over, did y'all have any other questions that I can address before we go over the results of operations? All right, here we go. We had 5,000, that's a really big number, I guess. We had 290 admissions, resulting in 1,513 patient days for the month. Our rehab admissions, we were at 21 compared to 24 last month, and Toya's in the audience, so she can speak to this. I don't know what to do, I'm a little confused. That's okay.
Strike that. We have some staffing limitations in our rehab department due to some nurses, so we had to stop admissions at 21. So that wasn't intentional. We've got our staffing, we're using some agency staffing, and so we've got our staffing kind of back in line.
Yes, we're gonna do better, a lot better this month.
Yeah, so our admissions will go up. So this wasn't a referral issue, this wasn't anything, this was just self-intended because of our nursing issues, nursing shortage. We had total surgeries of 159, we had 163 last month. First, we were at 61 compared to 55 last month. GI procedures, we had a good month, 57. I think this is the highest 6-month trend that we've had. 51 last month, so that's going in a good direction. Our cath lab procedures were down. We had 90 compared to 129 last month, but most of these were on the inpatient side, which we wanted to see our caths on the outpatient side, so a little concerning, but we'll just keep our eyes on that to see where that volume goes. ER visits, we had a 2,052 compared to 2,180 last month. So overall, volumes were pretty much in line with where they had been performing. If you look at our admissions by payer, we had 130 Medicare admissions, so a slight drop there. We had a slight drop in our Medicaid. We're at 61, we were at 65 last month, and I would have thought with our births going back up that we would have seen a rise in our Medicare, but so that number has stayed constant at 61. And then 51 managed care admissions for the month. If you look to see how that converted to our patient revenue, we had $23 million in gross patient revenue and 6.6 in net revenue. So we had some good revenue. A portion of our cost report is in that net number, and we did have some IGT payments that made our net for the month be at 6.6, which was the highest we've seen since June, so we had some really good net volume. If you look at our bottom line with the light blue being our EBITDA and the tan being our net margin, we are now 8 months with a positive EBITDA in a row. So if you were a statistician, I think that creates that is the trend. So 8 months was very good there. And our net margin, we were at a loss of $42,000 for the month. Days unbilled, we're at 7. We still have some issues that we're still trying to address with some of our physicians getting some of their discharges in a timely manner, so we continue to work on that. We have some high length of stays, it's not on this, and we'll continue to working on some of those issues throughout as much as we can. Patient collections for the month, we're at $4,337,000, slightly less than where we were in October at $5.3 million. So still pretty good collections when you look at kind of where we've been for the last 6 or 7 months. So this is what our income statement looks like. So what I did this month, and I hadn't done it, I have not presented it like this previously, but the first column is our actual current month and our budget. And then in the prior 3 columns, we have actual year-to-date and budget. And then I have the prior month column. So what I really want to do tonight is for you to take a look at kind of where we are compared to prior year. I just recently went out and spent a lot of time in the community talking about IGT support and talking about support from the community. And what I heard a lot was, you guys haven't really shown a lot of improvement, and I don't really see a plan. And so what I'm hoping the takeaway of this is there really is some improvement, and there really is, we really are, I believe, heading in the right direction. So when you look at our net patient for the month, we're at 6.5 million compared to a budget of 6.4 million. On a year-to-date basis, we're at 33 million on net patient revenue against $31 million budget. When you look at our net operating revenue, which includes our tax subsidy and our other revenue, we're at 6.6 million, actual 6.2 budget, and we're at $31 million actual for the year-to-date, and we were at $29 million last year. So that's a pretty significant improvement. But then when you look at our total operating expenses, for the month, we're at 6.7 against a budget of 6.9. On a year-to-date basis, we're at 32 million against a budget of 34, but we're 32 million year-to-date expenses against 36 million last year. That's a pretty significant number. And then when you look at the net margin, and I'm just gonna look at this year, year-to-date, compared to where we were last year, year-to-date, we're at a net margin loss of 1.7 million for the year, and last year at this time, we were at a net loss of 7.3 million for the year. So our EBITDA, we have a positive EBITDA for the year of 1.4 million against a negative EBITDA last year at the same time of 4.3 million. So when I look at the numbers, I find it hard to believe that we're not doing better and that we're not improving. And it's my wish this holiday season that our community really starts rallying around that and starts believing that our numbers are what they are, and we're doing everything we can here to improve the financial responsibility of this organization. And finally, I would be remiss if I did not say, in the season of giving, remember to give to our hospital foundation. And that's from a tax person also, it's a good write-off. So anyway, that's all I have. I don't have any questions or comments.
Any questions from the board?
I just want to make a quick comment. Rhonda and I had a meeting with Medco, I guess right before the last board meeting. So I told Rhonda this, but we need to recognize the hard work that she does, because I think that was above and beyond what you should have to do as a CFO. So I do want to thank you as a board member for having that meeting with me and Medco. And I think that's very important, and I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Okay.
My motion is to approve the
Financials, okay. Second?
I'll second it because my microphone's on.
All those in favor of approving Rhonda's report, signify by saying aye. Anybody opposed? No. Motion carries. Thank you. And now we are moving on to action and purchase requests from the strategic committee.
Strategic committee met, and like I was explaining to Anita, the main purpose of the strategic committee is to hear the things that the CEO wants to bring to the board. And it's always things dealing with operations, it can be things dealing with, future medical staff, mid-level providers, things like that, that affect our services.
the new board and the education and attestations that were required for reporting under our CIA. I am proud to state on the board, thank you. I have all of my documents now from you. The hospital also has annual responsibilities for conflicts of interest and then compliance attestations of all the management, managers, directors, and hospital leadership. We are less than 10 from being complete for the year. So we're doing really great on that. And as far as our health stream compliance training, our target is 95% or above for the reporting year 3. We have met that target already, and the year doesn't close until February 10th. So we're on track on those points under our CIA. Follow-ups also from last month's compliance report, 340B. We applied for 340B and had glitch or something previously. Our application was not accepted. The intent was to reapply for acceptance into the 340B program for January 1. There was an issue also with that application, so we will not be admitted to the 340B program for January, which means January 1, the hospital will reapply again with hopes of getting into the program for April 1, which is where we are with 340B. I also mentioned that we were contracting with a compliance resource group to do an external group to come in and do a complete risk assessment. That will begin tomorrow. They will be here in the morning, and they will be here for 2 days doing a complete risk assessment of the facility. Their final report will be due by the February 10th close date for this fiscal year. The CIA, that is a requirement under our CIA. I think we're on track, and I believe it's going to be better than the initial one they did in 2016. I think there's been a number of program updates to improve our compliance program and our processes here. We shall see. The Hospital Leadership Compliance Committee, which is the hospital's management director and senior leadership committee, where we do all of our oversight, monitoring, review. We had our last meeting yesterday. That information will be brought to audit and compliance. The next audit and compliance will be January 17th. There was no real hot button issues that I will need to present to the board tonight from that meeting. Now, a few regulatory updates. The OIG has an annual work plan that they put out. It's not out yet, but they do put out in advance items that they're looking at that will be on their next work plan. Some of the items that they posted that I want to discuss tonight, which are more in line with things that the hospital should pay attention to. So one of the CMS areas that they're looking at for the work plan, which was put out this month, was assessing inpatient hospital billing for Medicare beneficiaries. It said in 2016, hospitals billed Medicare $114 billion, and 17% of that was all Medicare payments. One of the issues they identified in that review is that there is an issue with upcoding. Now, upcoding is where a hospital either miscodes or they code at a higher level than the actual documentation suggests the level of care was actually provided. When you do that, you fall under that False Claims Act violation. So this is an area that Medicare is looking at. They're doing a study right now. They are analyzing Medicare data for hospital billing, and then they're going to determine how that data impact billing has changed over time and varied amongst hospitals. Now, what the outcome of this is going to be, and the part that will impact the hospital, which we need to monitor, is hospitals that they identify that have used upcoding or have been found in violation of upcoding, they are going to be targeting those facilities. So what does that mean for us? It means, number one, physicians need to make sure when they document, they thoroughly document their diagnoses and their reasons for those diagnoses, and then our coders need to make sure that they are coding appropriately to the medical documentation. That's our best defense in this portion of the oversight from the federal government. Next, something they put out in November, adverse events in hospitals. national incidence amongst Medicare beneficiaries. And this has to do with a 10-year study that they've done. It started in 2008. They've done roughly 15 audits so far related to the Medicare population. In 2008, they found 27% of Medicare populations who received care experienced an adverse event or an actual temporary harm. So what this study is doing is looking at to see if over the years, a 10-year period, if there's been a decrease in the level of harm and the prevalence of harm and the frequency of harm, and also what have been the costs associated with that harm. So what does that mean for us? It means that we need to continue to make sure that our patient safety activities for the facility are a priority and that everyone is following the processes when it comes to patient care. Because even though this year is coming to an end and the study is coming to an end, patient safety is a focus every day, and not just for Medicare patients, but for all patients in the facility. So it needs to remain a focus. Medicare access and CHIP. So Medicare has, in an effort to decrease the risk of violations or thefts of patients' information, namely their social security number on their Medicare card, Medicare has switched to a Medicare beneficiary identification number. So cards, we are seeing patients that are coming in now that have the Medicare, that's called an MBI, the Medicare Beneficiary Identification Card. What we need to do as it relates how that impacts this facility is simply that we need to make sure we keep our processes in place for ensuring that you have the correct patient. So if they come in with their new card, make sure that you identify that card with a photo ID, that this is the right person. This is a study by the federal government right now. They're looking at the number of cards that come back undeliverable and then looking at how they can improve their processes of protecting the new Medicare beneficiary identification numbers. This is all to prevent theft of health services. And having come here from California, we actually had a law, you may have one here the same or similar, called theft of medical services. And I actually saw those cases where I remember distinctly one day having a phone call and a lady saying, I got a bill from your hospital for having a baby. I don't have any babies. So we were able to identify the person, they were arrested and prosecuted, but it was a theft of medical services. So on this end for Medicare, it's just they are looking at the process, but what we need to do on our end is do our best to identify that whoever comes for services, they are who their card says that they are. The CMS, fee-for-service and managed care organizational provider requirements, again, this is another process that the federal government is getting involved with. Expected issue date is 2019, and this is just, the federal government is, CMS is ensuring that all states appropriately assess providers who participate in the fee-for-service and Medicare, managed care organization provider Medicaid services. So CMS will be issuing these advisories on enrollment screening activities to each state. So that's a state level thing, but eventually that will trickle down to the facility level. And so we just need to keep watch for that. So whenever we get whatever it is we need to do to apply, make sure we stay in that service, that we do it timely. And then finally, we just had a Texas judge overturn the Affordable Care Act. So what does that mean for this organization? Nothing right now, because that is on appeal and it will make its way to the Supreme Court. It's already been shot down once or twice already. But for now, if someone shows up and they have coverage through the Affordable Care Act, it's business as usual. It's no impact at this particular time. So I talked a little bit earlier about the board and the hospital and signing their annual conflicts of interest statements, and we talked a little bit about some things that the federal government are looking at. And these are the reasons why we focus so much on compliance in these areas. These are a few cases that I've pulled. The first one actually is a Dallas case, and this came out just a couple months ago in October. And there were 2 physicians and 3 nurses that were sentenced to 46 months in prison for, in essence, Medicare fraud. They were involved in a home care scheme where they were not seeing patients, and patients weren't qualified for services, but they were submitting documentation for claims on these patients. So fraud, and that's something that you have to monitor and in the hospital to make sure when we bill for services, we are billing for services that we actually are providing. Second is a HIPAA issue. Anthem was required to pay $16 million to CMS for a massive data breach. They had over 79 million patients' data back in 2015 that was exposed due to a cyber hack. As a result of that, patients' names, medical record numbers, social security numbers, and dates of birth were released in that hack. They have been fined $16 million for that. That's the largest data hack in U.S. history, and one of the largest fines as a result. So what do we do about that? Well, we have internal IT systems in place that will pick up on any external attempt to get into our patient care records. And IT are constantly looking at their systems, doing upgrades, having external audits to make sure we have appropriate safeguards in places to hopefully prevent these things from happening. But one of the biggest issues is just what they had, a cyber hack, and I actually had it involvement with that also in a facility in California, where you get that call that you don't want to get, if someone's telling you they've got access and you see they have gotten into your system, and they're telling you to pay them X million in Bitcoins, or they're going to release your data, and they're serious. And unfortunately, on more than one occasion, the federal government has stepped in and told facilities you probably need to pay it. So we want to try and make sure that never happens here. So staying on top of our IT services are really important. And then finally, I have an anti-kickback case that I pulled. And again, all these cases are within the last 3 or 4 months. We had, and this one's interesting because this is not like the other ones. This isn't, there's not a judgment or sentencing, but there's an indictment. And in this particular case, you have a drug manufacturer for fentanyl medication that is used to be sprayed under the tongue. And what the company did, what created the kickback, or the alleged kickback situation is, they had a particular physician that they kind of use as kind of their model. And he would prescribe the meds, of course, tell his colleagues, and he would go and do speaking engagements on behalf of the organization to use this particular medication. The problem was the company was paying him extremely high amounts of money for these speaking engagements. The federal government sees that as a kickback. It's an inducement. Who knew, right? Yeah. So, so what does that mean? Well, that really goes back to that, like, conflicts of interest. Looking at, what are your ties to manufacturers when it comes to your work within this hospital? And one of the audits I had to do earlier this year, actually back in January, back in July, we did, the CMS has, it's called an open payments review. And what we did is every provider who provides care in this hospital, I had to go into their open payments review tool online, and what CMS has is every manufacturer that's paid a provider for services for that manufacturer for whatever reason, they will have that listed there, and they will have what is the reasonable and customary service fee or honorarium, or however you want to call it, for that service. So then you can see, who's like getting the highest amounts of dollars from different manufacturers. And then you take, what you do with that data is you take it and you look at it and you go, okay, these people are in our facility. Is anybody over that threshold? And if they are, then you look at, okay, do they have any contracting responsibility here? As in, they can set contracts. I'm a surgeon and I can contract with a hip joint manufacturer to bring in certain types of hip joints here. Well, you look at those because you want to see if there is a conflict of interest, and then you address those timely. So those are the types of cases that are out there. They have a relevance to our facility just for oversight purposes, that we make sure that we don't have these issues, and we just stay vigilant and keep monitoring. We will have a legal update in our executive session by Denise Glass, who's a partner with Norton Rose Fulbright, which is our CIA attorney firm. She will be providing an update for us. That's it for my presentation. Are there any questions?
Okay, thank you very much. Need a motion to move the rest of the compliance report into executive session?
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Motion carries, and that's moved into the executive session. Okay, we have quality survey. Michelle Nash.
Please note that are fully certified, Michelle. But you are fully certified. I am, official as of, late last month, earlier, a few weeks ago. I'm actually a certified professional in healthcare quality now. The agenda said the quality survey, but it's just my general quality report that I have to go over tonight. You guys should have all of the dashboards there in your documents. On the first page of that, the top part has our readmission rate. One thing that I just want to add real quickly, I know that there's not a lot of third quarter data in here. We had a delay in getting our August and September data submitted to Premier in order for us to be able to extract and have all that information ready. That information has since been submitted, and October is getting submitted this week also, so we're getting caught back up on that. But that delayed my ability to pull that third quarter numbers. I hope to have those by our quality committee that's coming up here in January, and so I'll have a bigger update on everything coming in. The inner readmissions, you can see for each quarter, there's a target, which based off of our patient levels, how many do we expect to have readmitted and where we're actually at. We've had some ups and downs in those. I can tell you, these ones are just in specific categories, but I can tell you for quarter three, just overall, our readmission rate significantly dropped for quarter three. One of the things that we think really helped that is there's the STAR clinic is in place now in town, and so it's helping to see patients quicker after discharge, and so we think that's really helping kind of drive those readmission numbers down. The next part there, lines 8 through 13, the ones that you see that are highlighted in yellow, those are ones that are part of our value-based purchasing, so they affect monetarily some of our payment that comes in. So those 8 through 12 are infection control numbers. We're doing really good in those numbers for this year. On the far right, you can see where we were for the previous year. The one that we're still really focusing on is our CDIF numbers. CDIF has went up this year just nationwide due to the focus on antimicrobial stewardship. So they're seeing a lot more antibiotic-induced CDIF cases. We do have a CDIF protocol that we put into place in quarter three. We got the education and that whole thing put into place. And we hope to see that decrease our numbers some moving forward. Overall, we are at 8 cases of hospital onset CDIF so far this year versus 13 from last year. So we hope with the protocol that we have in place that that's going to help us some. The next few lines there, from 13 all the way down to 22, those are our charge directive measures. Those are the things that we have to manually instruct for CMS for reporting purposes. Overall, on those, on our PC measures, we do really, really well on those. First two are a little bit higher, but those targets that are there are Joint Commission. And one thing that we talk about those heavily in our Women's and Children's Committee, but there are no fallout, or there's no conclusions on those. For example, if we have a mom that comes in and has a medical indication to have, first-time mom, has a medical indication to have a C-section, and they take her to C-section for her and the baby, there's no exclusion in that measure for it. It still falls out in terms of justice on that measure. We do review all of those. All of those are
than some of the other hospitals across the country. The rest of the PC measures, we're doing fantastic on. On a couple of our outpatient measures, we've dropped a little bit. We've narrowed that down to just some gaps in documentation that we're working on improving. Down to our sepsis one. This is a new measure that came out a couple of years ago. It's a very difficult measure, and we're doing really well in meeting that measure overall. I know that number was kind of low, but even the biggest, best of the best hospitals are only meeting about 60 to 70% on that measure. So overall, we're doing pretty good, and we continually see improvement in that.
Quick question on that.
In-
Michelle, question on that. Is that just like initiation of antibiotics once sepsis is recognized? And what's sort of the measurement on the sepsis? So what are they looking for in the sepsis one? Initiation of appropriate antibiotics or repeat?
Well, there's a whole protocol that goes along with that. It looks at all of those things. It looks at when, from the time that the time zero is identified, whether were antibiotics, were blood cultures done before the antibiotics were done, was antibiotics given within a 3-hour time window. It looks at, and then it follows from there depending on whether it's classified as septic shock or severe sepsis, and then it goes into did they get fluids, did they get the appropriate amount of fluids, did they get the follow-up from the physician?
So if we miss on one of those, we fall out.
Then it falls out. Yes. The next part down, like our mortality numbers, this one again, like our readmission numbers, has a target for each quarter and then a number that we're actually at. And with these are based off of how the coding and documentation is behind those patients. So if our documentation doesn't show the patients actually as sick as they are, then that makes our expected mortality rate a lot lower. One thing that we found in this, because I do the mortality reviews on every mortality in the hospital on a monthly basis, and they're all, there's nothing weird that's happening with those. There's none that didn't have things done that should have been done or anything like that. So when I look at the mortality reviews and I see everything being done that could possibly be done for those patients, then I see these numbers, and when we're looking at that, it's really sitting up if it's just documentation for what's happening. If the documentation shows that our patients were actually as sick as they are, then our mortality rate, expected rate will be higher. And so we're exploring some ways that we can work on improving that documentation. We've narrowed down that that's kind of the biggest thing that we can do on that one.
Michelle, is that engaging physicians to document a certain way, basically, or?
Yeah, we've been talking in the physician committees about that. I take this same dashboard to all the physician committees also, and so we've been talking about it there. And the quality committee is kind of trying to come up with some ideas to help out that also. But we really need to get physician involvement on that.
But you know, on these first 3 pages of 53 items, 24 are below target. We have a lot of below targets. I'd like to discuss in the next quality meeting. I'd like to spend more time looking at this next time, because I see a lot of below target.
There are, and some of these are,
I just want you to be aware of that. I think we should go into detail like we have some physical.
You need to speak into the microphone.
At the next quality meeting, I'd like for us to go into a great amount of detail, because I think we have an excessive number of items on the target.
And if I could just, okay, I think a lot of the reasons we have those targets is documentation. And Dr. Hedden and I just talked about that we need to really get on our doctors to properly document, because I think that's why we're seeing the numbers, not so much related to the hospital, but for documentation purposes. So is that correct?
right.
Okay.
To that point, how many people do we have that's their job, basically, running around, and maybe beyond you answered it, but we have, like, a department, right, that runs around and makes sure the doctors are, kind of stays on them to document correctly. Is that correct? Or is it, I guess what I'm asking is, do we have a person that's their job, or do we leave it to like you or each individual department head to make sure it's being done? Is it more?
In the past, it's kind of been up to me and the department head, which makes it really hard, but see significant improvement in those areas.
It's hard to teach doctors.
Well, part of the other issue has been our computer system, as we know, is still somewhat antiquated. And the accessibility for the physician to go in and immediately see what needs to be documented, hit all those boxes, is not, a lot of it's kind of a hunt and peck, gotta really look for it. So that's the other issue.
Yeah,
You know, but
it just compounds that issue.
Right, but if that bullet would come up and make it easier, it wouldn't have
Prompt
missed as
kind of
often.
thing.
But unfortunately, that still hasn't been written down.
On that bottom part there, our blood culture contamination rate has continued to improve each quarter, and we've had no more falls with moderate or severe injury, and our fall rate overall at the hospitals are doing a lot better than that quarters. On that next page, you'll see all of our patient safety indicators, and the bottom part is our age caps. One thing that I want to add about the age caps, is that we, in quarter 3, moved to the NRC, as our age caps vendor, and we've moved back to, paper surveys rather than phone calls. I don't know if everybody's ever got that phone call, but it's very dry, it's very, kind of annoying, if you've ever gotten that phone call. And so it's really easy to get aggravated with that phone call. When we look at numbers prior to when we had the phone call, and when we're doing the paper surveys, our numbers overall were a lot better. So far, with this, we also have the ability to go in on a more regular basis and pull those numbers. I don't have those numbers in here yet because I'm not finalized for third quarter, because it takes 90 days to finalize those numbers. But the numbers are already looking a lot better than what they were in the past. But we can monitor that, we can be more proactive rather than reactive with that. And so I think that's going to help us a lot with that also. And all of our directors and managers have access to that also. On the next page, we have the Bowmar Rehab dashboard. You can see that they're meeting all of their measures. The only one that they're still kind of struggling with is the discharge to community, and that's just something that's really hard. They can continue working on it. They're not quite at their target. They have been improving, but it's kind of stigma that they're having to become people comfortable with going home. They want to go to a nursing home for a little longer, or somewhere else they don't feel comfortable in their own home. So they've been working really hard on that, and they are improving on that, but it's not quite meeting that target yet. The next one is DCI, which is our dialysis contract, and we're meeting all of the targets on that one. The one thing that was in red, I just want to make sure you guys know that's not necessarily a bad thing. That's the machine that had positive cultures required, that required an intervention. We hope that those kinds of things don't happen, but that's why that process is in place, to catch those, and then they rerun the cleaning and sterilizing and everything to make sure that that's cotton clean, and retest it before it's used on a patient. So we just, when we're looking at that, what we're looking at with that is we don't want to see a whole bunch of those happening all the time, because then that makes us wonder if the original cleaning process that they're doing is sufficient, and if they're actually doing it the way they're supposed to. The next one is the laboratory dashboard. You'll see that their best view are grayed out. The lab system doesn't have the ability to track those until the software gets updated, but they do track the ED stat. And then, of course, all of the blood transfusion reactions, frozen sections, and the blood culture contamination rate. And they are meeting all of their measures. The only one that's not quite there yet is the blood culture contamination that has been improving on a monthly basis. We've been doing a lot of education to improve that. The last one is just a PI project that we put into place to make sure that our blood transfusion record sheets are being 100% filled out, not, because even if you miss like one little blank on it, then that can lead to other issues with like surveys and that kind of stuff. So we're trying to just improve that process some. The next one is the pharmacy. The one thing that they really told me about these indicators here is for the rest of the have the ideal target numbers there, but most of the hospitals, they have a hard time reaching that number. The big thing that they look at to see how well that facility is doing is that number 4, the pharmacy adjusted patient day dollars. That looks at how much the pharmacy is spending per patient day, and they are meeting that target. But they're continuing to work on those other ones. The next few sheets go through the individual departmental dashboards. These are the individual PI projects for each one of the departments. Every department in the hospital has to pick a PI project that they do. And so they have to report on a quarterly basis on their report. And that's what the next few pages are. Do you have any questions on any of this? I know it's a lot of information.
Do you have plans for, especially when the rates kind of go all the way across as being under what you want the target rate to be? Do you have plans in place to do the education or?
Yes. Now, if you see one where it's not meeting their target all the way across, I meet with that either manager or director, and I help them figure out some new interventions, some new things they can put in place to meet their target. Sometimes it's things that they maybe haven't thought of yet, and sometimes it's adjusting their budget. A lot of times I'll get PI projects and they would want to meet this 100%. 100% ideal, but is 100% realistic. Now, there are some things that we absolutely want to 100%, but then on some other things, maybe 98% or maybe 95% might be sufficient, just depending on what it is. Still definitely shoot for that 100%, but sometimes that's just not always realistic to actually be able to do that. So I discuss those kinds of things with them, and I make sure that they monitor these on a monthly basis, they just report it to me on a quarterly basis. And so I make sure that when they're looking at it on a monthly basis, that they're not meeting their targets, that they're putting other interventions in place and saying, okay, we're still not meeting our target. Is it something that we're not doing? Did we not fully get this intervention implemented? What else can we do to meet those targets? This is a process that we've really been working a lot on over the past year. Prior to me being in this position, there were a number of departments that didn't even have to turn in PI projects. And so it's kind of been a learning process for all of them, learning kind of what that whole process is and how to do all of it. And then monitoring, making sure they have good interventions and those kinds of things in place. So.
I also saw several different things that said that they hadn't been implemented until, later on in the year and so forth. Is that because of regulations or something that we're getting from the federal or state governments?
It kind of depends on which one you're talking about. We had a couple of departments that were delayed in getting our projects set up, but then we had some that started projects later in the year because they had projects earlier in the year that they met. The idea is for a PI project to last for 3 to 6 months. The idea is that it's a small thing that you can implement some stuff, fix it, and move on to something else. So ideally, we only want the PI projects to be 3 to 6 months. They implement it, they meet their target, they monitor it for a little while longer, and then they move on to something else. And so some of the departments that have done PI projects for longer, they do that. They have PI projects that they put it in place, they met those targets, and stop that, and they start looking at something else. So it just kind of depends on which one. If you look at the third column there that says the reporter, that'll tell you the department and who reports it, and you can see which ones of those, especially if there was something that was started later in the year, you can see what they were doing previous to that.
I know one of the things that just kind of astonished me was with influenza vaccinations. And it was like it was great the first quarter and then it just evaporated, so.
Okay, so on influenza, those are only tracked in Q4 and Q1. The flu season is from October to March, so we don't really track it the rest of the year. Now, in my infection control department, we do track how many positive flus we have come through the ED and that kind of thing, but vaccinations are only tracked from October to March.
Okay, so that's why it's blacked out. report? I believe so.